Now, the unrest in Egypt continues to spread to other parts of the Arab world. Syrians were the latest to take to the streets. So is there anything governments can do to limit the contagion? Joining me now from Tel Aviv is Dan Schueftan, Deputy Director for National Security Studies at Haifa University in Israel. Dan, good to see you. Thanks very much for coming in. Just want to start by asking you to explain the significance of these events in Egypt for us and how they're being viewed in Israel.
Well, first of all, we have a major problem in the whole region that has global implications because Egypt is the cornerstone of stability in this region for more than a generation. And this cornerstone is being eroded now for two reasons. First of all, the problems inside Egypt, and second, because it exposed an American approach, an American policy that undermines the confidence in many other regimes in this region that they can survive. So the problem is that the Iranian radicalism that is joined by Syria, Hamas and Hezbollah and also supported by Turkey may now overtake the whole region, and a region that is always unstable but was less unstable for a whole generation will now lose the anchor of its stability because of what is happening in Egypt.
These protests seem to involve people from across the social, political spectrum. And we're not just talking about the Muslim Brotherhood or the Islamists here. We could see a very broad coalition of candidates potentially running for election, perhaps a diverse parliament emerge from this. But that aside, even if President Hosni Mubarak was to step down, could Egypt's peace treaty with Israel still be maintained?
You see, the problem is not an immediate takeover of the Muslim Brothers, but what you see on television and looks very nice can only be the first stage. We've seen it in the region. The assumption of people in the West is that if you have a government that reflects the sentiment of the public, this is a sign of stability. But in this region, things look a little different. I mean, look at Gaza. In Gaza, you've had free elections, and the sentiment of the people was to elect Hamas, a barbaric government that you have in this region. If you look at what is happening in Iran, you also had the first stage 30 years ago of very nice people wanting democracy, going in the streets, but then the result is that in the final analysis, the only organized force with wide public support, which is Islamic radicals, comes to the fore.
With that in mind, Dan, to what extent does Israel's military planning rely on peace with Egypt?
Tremendously. You see, the Israeli army is relatively small compared to the capabilities of the Arab states around us. And the most important Arab country with the largest and most modern army, namely Egypt, was not considered an immediate threat. And therefore, the Israeli army was built for a much smaller confrontation only with enemies from the north and east of Israel. If Israel has to deal with the Egyptian army also being a risk, I'm not saying immediately a war or breaking of the peace treaty, but you can't assume anymore that Egypt will not participate in a war because you don't know what will happen there. And you must prepare today for the eventuality of a clash in 5 years or in 10 years, and then you have to build a much larger army. This involves much, much larger defense expenditure.